Before I get into it, I'd like to thank a few people. There's been a lot that's happened in the last 15, 16 years in relation to this book. First of all, Don, I'd like to thank you for trusting me to take on and publish your tunes. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience, one of the best ones of my life, no doubt about that. Ewan and Velda McCann sitting right next to them, to Don, they have helped me a lot as well. Around the corner here, Brom Briefelt and his wife Jan, they have printed the books for me. Good friends of mine, I've known them for 25, well, Brom for 25 years and Jan for almost as long. Paul for arranging this do, our hosts, Greg, and everyone else behind the bar. But anyway, let's go back in history a little bit of time. I never started learning the pipes until I was about 16 in 1963. I was involved in pipe bands and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think it was sometime in the 1970s when I first met Don very briefly at it might have been Rotorua or Invercargill, 74, 75, somewhere around there. I can't remember exactly when it was. But it wasn't really until the 1980s that I got to know Don a lot better. And then I got to know him really well when I was invited a couple of times to the Targe competition at the local Scottish, what do you call it, the Scottish Society run every June. And I was invited to play and I saw Don there. And I mentioned, I don't know why, that I could help Don to publish his new book. I had just briefly got into computers, only about 2 or 3 years before. Then Don took me up on it. And lo and behold, then I had a tiger by the tail, trying to find a program that would be adequate for setting up the tunes that would make them presentable. And I purchased or acquired something like about 20 or 25 different programs. A lot of them weren't adequate. I mean, we're talking now 20 years ago almost, and some of these programs were not very good. Eventually I found one, and then I had the task of setting them up, and then I had the task of getting them proofread, and Don came up to Auckland on one occasion with his old mate Willie, and we, in between whiskies and beers, we managed to proofread a few tunes. And then I came down, I think on 2 occasions, to Palmerston North, and we proofread them again in between single malts and Guinnesses. And then in 2001, finally, the book was presented. We didn't have a formal launching like we've got this time, although there was a little bit of a mini launching. I wasn't able to get here. And then at the same time as that started, I compiled, started writing a series of articles for the Pipe Band magazine on New Zealand composers. Don was the first, of course, because I had all the information at my fingertips, and it was just dead easy after publishing the book to put it into an article form for the Pipe Band magazine. Since then I've written about 40 different New Zealand composers. Some of them do give Don a bit of a hurry along, a lot of them don't, but I still believe that Don is the best New Zealand composer with bagpipe music. And there are 1 or 2 who are close behind him, but for 70 years, it's just quite incredible that the number of tunes he's composed and the quality of them. And Paul touched on it, how good the tunes in the last few years have been. I still believe that book 2 that I've just published, almost every tune in that is playable. Almost every tune. And they're so good, in my opinion. When it came to publishing this book, I've been talking to Don a lot on the phone in the last 12 years since book 1 was done. And I said to him that I'd probably get round to doing book 2 sometime, but and Don sort of said to me, oh, well, you can wait until I'm dead, you know. And I said, well, that might be a convenient time, but I'd like to see it done before then. I'd like to see it done before then. But it's the logistics of doing it, and I was umming and ahhing. This was as recent as probably November or December last year. And every New Year's Day, Alan Cameron, who you might all know, was the editor of the Pipe Band magazine. He's a drummer, not a piper. but a very talented musician as well. And he stays with us every New Year's night after the Waipu Highland Games. And we usually have a few drams and a few beers, and we talk about things. This one just gone, I had a single malt in the hand, and he had one too. And I mentioned to him about the fact that I talked to Don about compiling book 2. And I said, oh, you know, I don't know if I've got time. And Alan, if you do know him, he's very blunt. He's got a very short way of putting things, but he's got some rather attractive adjectives he uses too. I won't use these adjectives, but what he basically said to me was, just get off your ass and do it. There were other adjectives in there. and I thought, well, okay, good point. So then I rang Don, I think a day or two later, and I said to Don, right, that's it, I'm going to start publishing your book. Don was quite emotional. He didn't think it was going to happen in his lifetime, and here it was. It took me 5 months. The previous book took me 5 years. But of course I'd done all the hard work and I knew what to do by this stage. Then I decided at the same time that the Makagram Book 1 needed a reprint. So I had to rearrange that because it was in landscape originally and it had to come into portrait shape. I had to redo all the tunes. But it didn't take very long. I did it quite quickly. And then I presented it, I had it proofread by Don, and he was very good. And I had other people help me a bit, and then I presented it to Brom, and out come those delightful books, and I reckon they are quite superb, the way they've come out. But in amongst all of this, there have been hundreds of hours of phone calls. And I have heard some absolutely wonderful stories from Don. I'm under a threat that some of the stories are not to be published until later on, we'll say. And I'll honour that, Don. In fact, I may even keep them to myself. I enjoy them so much. But some of those phone calls have been absolutely quite delightful. I've learned all about the stories. I've learned about all the people who are mentioned in the book. And today I've met all of you. Well, not all of you, but most of you. And it's wonderful to see the faces behind some of these tunes. And really, the last 15 years of doing all this work for Don has been just wonderful. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and if you had asked me 40 years ago about publishing a bagpipe music book or any book, I'd have said you're joking. Well, it's happened, and I'm delighted it's happened. Donald, thank you very much for what you've done and for the help you've given me over the last 15 years.
And thank you for doing it just in time.
Yeah. Look, there is one thing I will say. One thing I will say. They say that only the good die young. Don, I believe there's a few more stories to hear. What do you reckon about that?
I think it's time you subsided into silence.
Well, that's my cue to go and get another Guinness. I agree. And then I might just buy us a dram each and we might have it together.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Thank you everyone for turning up. It's been wonderful. I've enjoyed it.